Breaking news today. As energy revenue and the ruble continue to decline, Russia's economy continues to struggle. As a result of sanctions, Russia's income from oil and gas production dropped by 45% in the first 3 months of 2023. Meanwhile, this past week was the worst for the ruble against the dollar in at least a year. According to a new study, Russia's economic downturn in 2022 was twice as bad as the government reported. Russia's economy continues to struggle amid falling oil and gas export revenues and a weakening currency as Moscow navigates its second year of its war against Ukraine. As crude prices dropped and gas exports plummeted in the first quarter of 2023, the country's energy revenues plummeted 45% year-over-year to $19.6 billion. Even though Russia is still sending out crude and fuel products, the data suggests that the price cap imposed by the US and its allies is having the desired dual effect of reducing revenue while keeping products flowing through the market. Sanctions against the Russian energy sector have been predicted by experts not to have a major impact on total production volume. Analysts believe that demand could still be boosted by countries like China and India, and that Russian supplies could still make it to Europe despite the sanctions. According to Bloomberg data, shipments out of Russian ports fell by 1.24 million barrels per day in the first week of April, the largest weekly drop since mid-December. Expenditures rose by 34% to $99 billion as the cost of the war in Ukraine rose alongside the decline in energy income. The result was a $29 billion deficit in the first quarter of the fiscal year, quite the reversal from the $14 billion surplus the previous year. Meanwhile, last week was the worst for the ruble against the dollar since April 2022, with a drop of over 5% by Friday. Russia's economic downturn in 2022 may have been much more severe than official data indicated, which may help explain the deterioration at the beginning of 2023. In a paper for the Center for Economic Policy and Research in February, Adrian Schmith and Hannah Sokno found that when military spending is removed from GDP figures, the decline is twice as bad as domestic figures imply. It is not yet fully reflected in the official data releases, but the data currently points to a further loss of momentum driven by stagnant real estate prices and lower business activity in recent months, the authors wrote. As the Russian economy already feels the effects of war and sanctions, this only makes things look worse. Russia will go the way of the Soviet Union, according to economist Konstantin Sonin. Everything that's happening makes the Russian economy more primitive, more backwards, he told Novaya Gazeta, a Russian news outlet. This ensures the perpetuation of barbarism and a bygone era. The GOP's anti-interventionist vein was recently elevated to the mainstream by Ron DeSantis's recent remarks distancing the U.S. from Ukraine's war with Russia. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has spoken out about where he thinks the United States stands in the conflict in Ukraine. Republican, It Boy, says opposing Russian aggression in Ukraine is not in the vital national interest of the United States, calling Russia's invasion of Ukraine a territorial dispute, in response to a questionnaire sent to 2024 hopefuls by Fox News last month. DeSantis's position on the most pressing global issue of the day may not be surprising for anyone who has watched him rise to national prominence through his headline-grabbing, hardline conservative state policies, but it is significant. This puts him in line with roughly half of the Republican base, who also tend to have a more favorable opinion of Russian President Vladimir Putin than of Joe Biden. The statements made by DeSantis are similar to those made by former President Donald Trump, who declared his candidacy for the presidency in 2024 last year. Trump has a more extensive and shifting record on the subject, but in the same Fox News poll, Bush said that opposing Russia in Ukraine was in the national interest for Europe, but not for the United States. The two leading candidates for the 2024 Republican nomination hold views that are diametrically opposed to those of the party, which has spent decades fighting to spread democracy around the world and viewing Russia as the epicenter of a evil empire, and, more recently, as an autocratic and corrupt state that, despite being unable to compete with the United States, is determined to meddle in its affairs. As Republican senators responded to DeSantis' remarks, the tension between them became clear. What matters is American leadership. In response to DeSantis' comments, Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn tweeted, "Poll-tested answers are not leading. When it comes to national security, protecting Ukraine is guarding our own," Cornyn wrote on Twitter. The conflict in Ukraine is not a territorial dispute, Florida Republican and one-time presidential candidate Marco Rubio told conservative radio host Hugh Hewitt. It's not the United States' top national security priority, but it's still crucial. In an interview with British TV personality Piers Morgan, DeSantis appeared to do damage control by calling Putin a war criminal, who should be held accountable. DeSantis referred to Russia as a gas station with a bunch of nuclear weapons, and said of Putin, "I think he's hostile to the United States, but the thing that we've seen is he doesn't have the conventional capability to realize his ambitions." As Russia's bloody invasion of Ukraine enters its second year, experts note that the episode has brought to the surface a long-simmering debate within the GOP over foreign policy. According to David Hopkins, a professor of political science at Boston College who specializes in party politics, the invasion of Ukraine has dropped this new set of events into what already was a kind of tension on the right between those who see American defense of Europe as being a projection of American strength and those who see it as excessive entanglement with a culturally and economically liberal set of foreign states that they don't necessarily wish to defend. What is the proper conservative position on the invasion of Ukraine? I think that's a big part of what's happening right now in Republican politics.